Hello, welcome back to my extended series on improving our democracy. My name is Joshua Landers. I'm a student here at San Jose State in the Communication Studies Department. My supervisor and teacher for this project goes by the name of Scott Lasco. He's the coach of the speech and debate forensics team here. And did an amazing job supervising me on this project. So huge shout out to Scott. Right on. So in this episode, in this presentation, I'm going to be presenting to you my second way we could improve our democracy, which is creating a social safety net or ending houselessness. Before I go on any further, I would love to talk to you a little bit about what is a democracy. Before we can improve our democracy, I think it's important for our audience to understand what exactly that is. So, what is democracy? Democracy comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people. In democracies, it is the people who hold sovereign power over the legislature and government. Although nuances apply to the world's various democracies, certain principles and practices distinguish democratic government from other forms of government. Democracy is government in which power and civic responsibility are exercised by all citizens, directly or through their freely elected representatives. So just to make sure you're all with me, we're talking about how there's different forms of democracy. So in its original meaning or form in Greece, democracy was one man, one vote, meaning that it wasn't a representative democracy, it was quote unquote true democracy. Majority rule, one vote, whoever won kind of won the vote. And everyone got a chance to vote, and that's exactly how it was tallied. Whereas here in the United States, we have a representative democracy, meaning that we elect officials to serve on Congress, in the Senate, or even at the local levels on our state governments, our city councils, and things like that. So we exercise our power in this democracy by choosing people to vote for us or to make decisions for us, if that makes sense. So that's where our power lies in choosing our representatives in a representative democracy like the United States. So as we continue, democracy is a set of principles and practices that protect human freedom. It is the institutionalization of freedom. Democracy rests upon the principles of majority rule coupled with individual rights and minority rights. All democracies, while respecting the will of the majority, zealously protect the fundamental rights of individuals and minority groups. Democracies guard against all powerful central governments and decentralized government to regionalized and local levels, understanding that local government must be accessible and responsive to the people as possible. Democracies understand that one of their prime functions is to protect such basic human rights as freedom of speech and religion, the right to equal protection under law, and the opportunity to organize, participate in the political, economic, and cultural life of society. So all in all, what a democracy does is, in comparison to, say, a monarchy and oligarchy, where the decisions are either made by one king or a small group of people in power, a democracy, it pretty much enfranchises all citizens to participate, politically, economically, and culturally, as I said. So, now that we all have a solid understanding of what a democracy is, how America's democracy works, we're going to get into the part where we figure out how we can improve it and how we could fix it, which is the point of this problem. So, without further ado, how do we fix it? Well, we'll start with the housing issue, right? So this particular presentation is about creating a social safety net or ending houselessness. So, the housing issue. I believe it is the duty of a proper democracy to provide a social safety net. In other words, anyone who is unable to provide for themselves is at very least sheltered and fed. According to national reports, about 150 million people, or 2% of the world's population, are homeless. while 1.6 billion more lack adequate housing. In the U.S. alone, more than 500,000 people are experiencing homelessness on a single night. California has a total homelessness population of 161,548. These people need to be housed. Investing in safe housing, investing in safe housing for the houseless would be a huge step towards an equitable democracy. Um, yeah, so I think that the important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about housing and a social safety net is that democracies are created for freedom, right? And they're created to allow people to be politically engaged and socially engaged. Um, and actually, it's essential that people are engaged in that manner. But it's very hard to be engaged when you're still looking for food or looking for housing, things like that. I think your chances of voting, making it to the polls, go way down if you don't even have an address that someone could send you a ballot, and things of that nature. So another thing to keep in mind is that we all have different abilities, right? I'm someone that has a brother who is on the spectrum and he has certain special needs. He had special education and things of such. Um, and it would be very difficult for him without the assistance of family or friends or the government um, to provide for himself, right? And so I think that to improve our democracy, it would be ideal for no matter who you are, no matter how smart or slow you are, no matter how capable or skilled you are, um, that we have a social safety net. So that that no matter what, at least you'll be fed, at least you'll have a house. Even if you don't want to work, we won't have people in the streets. And this isn't something that just affects the people that are houseless. It also affects quote unquote everyday people who are walking by and now they have to feel like they're a bad person for ignoring the houseless person. Um, at the end of the day, I think we would all prefer to not see people homeless and in need like that. We would rather see them being housed, and I would personally want my tax money um, to go to something like that to house these people, so then it doesn't have to be relying on philanthropy to fix the problem, if that makes sense. So you see the numbers. We have a huge homelessness population, and the resources are already there to house these people. So I believe it would improve our democracy if we did that. If we housed them and we fed them and we made sure that no American is homeless and no American is hungry. I had a little video here about a Vanderbilt professor explaining kind of the ideas of social safety net, the problems that homelessness and houselessness causes to a democracy, especially if it becomes more widespread. I want our democracy, our nation, our country to say no American's going to be homeless or hungry. We are the richest country in the world, therefore we shouldn't have such mass poverty and such mass numbers of people who aren't having their needs met. As we continue, let's talk about some of the origins and causes for homelessness. So, lack of adequate income. Contrary to popular belief, not all homeless people are jobless. Some of them have jobs. Unfortunately, they're just not earning enough to afford rent. And no access to affordable housing. As more and more people flock to the cities, the demand for housing increases. As a result, rents have skyrocketed. In major cities, people now have to spend more than half of their monthly income on rent alone. This leaves low-income earners with no choice but to live in their cars or shelters. Again, these things can be prevented. These things are a result of capitalism, hardcore capitalism, landowners and things like such. Driving rent up, and again, these are all things that can be controlled. By decision makers and by legislation and things like that. So it does not have to be this way. Affordable housing could be a thing. It just needs a little bit of help from our government, some subsidies. Um, more reasons. So let's continue on this. Foreclosure, according to research, only 37% of homes are free and clear of mortgages. This means that 60% of homeowners in this country are bound in a mortgage. But with the tighter mortgage laws in the past few years, many Americans are losing their homes to foreclosure. Oftentimes, victims of foreclosure have nowhere to turn and are forced to live in their cars. Another reason is the lack of education. Education helps someone get a better job. Unfortunately, not all of us have access to it, as we discussed in the last video. Those who do not uh, excuse me, just sneezed a little bit. Those who don't often end up in low paying menial jobs if they can find employment at all. With no jobs, they obviously cannot afford rent, much less own a home. Rental discrimination. It is so rampant in the U.S. that a law was even created to prevent it. Despite this, it is still pretty common. It's not unheard of for people to be turned out of rental homes just because of their color, race, or religion. So yeah, if we could get to the root of the houselessness issue and the hunger issue, then we're more likely to solve it. So these are some of the reasons why it exists. We're running out of time here, but I want to run over some statistics. The average life expectancy of a homeless person is just 50 years. Almost 40% of homeless people are African Americans. 61% of homeless people are men and boys. 20% of homeless people are kids. Which is, again, it gets back to the point is that people like to assume that homelessness is a choice. Oh, that person's lazy. They're deciding to be homeless. They're deciding not to work. But I don't think you could really say that about children, right? So these things aren't really a choice. The fact that I grew up in a home and I didn't grow up in the street wasn't because of any decision I made. So when it comes to improving our democracy, I think we would love to even the playing field for things that we can control and things that we can't control, right? I shouldn't have some advantage just because my parents had a home, you know? I think everyone should be guaranteed a home. That should be a universal basic right, and that's kind of the point I'm making. And other people believe it too. Permanent housing interventions have grown by over 450% in 5 years. So I'm not the only one. How ending homelessness would improve our democracy. Every man, here we go. Every man, woman, child living in insufficient housing right now are a valuable member to our society. They have something to offer. Investing in these people's housing, their safety is a huge first step in the process of re-entering society with dignity. More importantly, for this project, safe housing is the first step towards re-engaging these folks in the democratic process, right? If they can't even make ends meet or house themselves, it's going to be hard for them to educate themselves and take on candidates and take time to educate themselves on policy and make it to the polls. All these things become more and more inaccessible if they don't have access to housing. And the cost of homelessness, it doesn't just affect them, it affects us. The effects of homelessness on society can be quite costly, not only in terms of tax dollars spent, but also in the strain it puts on social agencies, individuals, and families. When homeless people are admitted into a hospital, their stay is about 4 days longer on average, which adds up to an additional cost to the public of about 2,400 per incident. That's not the only way we're paying for it. We pay for cops to go out and kind of patrol and stay out there by homeless encampments here in the Bay Area. So, you know, it's not an issue that's just affecting the people who are houseless. It's affecting all of us. So in conclusion, I have a quick quiz question. How would ending homelessness improve our democracy? Make streets cleaner, no more soliciting for change, restoring dignity and participation in democratic process, and less apartments available. And the biggest answer here is C, right? It's all about restoring dignity and participation in the democratic process. That's how it would improve our democracy. Again, thank you so much for listening. I have some sources here for you to check out, and I'll see you on the next episode.